Has the market changed its mind about what the Fed may do next?
We have got to get inflation behind us. I wish there were a painless way to do that. There isn't.
Think of that number, and maybe more importantly, what do you think the Fed's going to do, and therefore what their equity is going to do?
I've been saying over and over again to my colleagues here that he wants your portfolio down so that you won't be able to spend as much.
And good morning, welcome to, or good day, welcome to Financial Stockholm. I'm Christopher Crystal, and today we'll have something special with us. We'll have Andre Havas, who is the CEO of Semalgo, and maybe from there we can draw some other conclusions other than my negative bias. Because right now, if we look at the Swedish press, we see a lot of focus, and this is globally as well, on the recent attacks that Ukraine had with the bridge in Crimea, and this is now what Russia calls part of its sovereign territory, or these regions that broke away, and so they are amping up the volume on continued attacks, and we saw the missile attacks coming through now from Russia into Ukraine, and so we're no closer to a peace talk. We're no closer to any sort of real resolution of what's going on. And the fear is really how the war may progress to an eventual nuclear conflict. And this would be a conquest and destruction of the global economy. This would also be the worst ecological and economic disaster we've seen. And so we again have to look and wonder why we don't have more ESG voices coming out and protesting the war. We have seen war protests in the past, but right now the consumer seems to be more focused on the rising inflation and their household cost being increasingly expensive for them, as we have this inflated money supply that needs to contract. So we'll look for notes in the ECB comments. We'll look for notes from the Fed comments, but primarily what we're focused on here in Sweden is the safety of Sweden. And we have a emergency council being drawn to discuss the reaction to all of this by the outgoing government, and we have the end of the week as the deadline for the new incoming government. We'll see how this develops, and if there's any further infighting. We do have the discussion of energy and the rising price of electricity. This is a global event, and we have the plan that we need for Sweden and of course for Europe. People are discussing price caps. This has never worked and is not really what I see as a viable economic solution. However, it's been what's been proposed. We saw the results from Prague. We already see from the EU and the EC, the Consilium, talking about what they're looking at for price capping. We see the shipping, and what we'll see going forward for the Russian gas to fuel our energy consumption here in Europe and production. And then we've seen also, to add to the mix, a record price of diesel in Sweden. So things are not looking so good there. A lot of the diesel is being blamed on the Kronor and commodity price increases, but we'll watch that as we see other articles in the Swedish press talking about high electricity prices and what this is going to mean long term. So what would benefit? Well, of course, we see discussion about social media and how to regulate and control. So further censorship will be coming there. We see also in the banking sector, the Swedbank CEO, she's still in trial. And this goes till the 25th of November. She's facing charges that could put her away for 2 years and 6 years, and so possibly 8 years. And she's giving testimony that seems contradictory to what she said before and written before. So there's an issue there, and the Swedish banks will be under some pressure, especially as we have our interest rate hikes possibly coming more or further. You do see some banks raising their savings rate interest level to their accounts in an attempt to gain business. Most importantly, I think we see the earnings coming out and how they're dealing with the inflation cost, if they're able to sell enough goods or at a high enough cost to overcome the effects of inflation. Logistics is still mixed in there. You're seeing increased discussion in the US about the truckers and getting their container trucks and the containers for those trucks. But a spot of bright news, we do see that the electrical car sellers are able to increase their sales, and that's great, but it does mean that we need further investment in the electrical grids, the infrastructure for the grids. China's been doing this mainstream for their economy. And you see a lot of alternative energy sources, and you see the steady, strong mix of the petrochemicals. And this would go against our EU goals on by 2030, 35, and 2050, and the reductions that we look to have there. And the EU has on their webpage very clearly stated that we want to be a carbon-free economy. And so there's a lot to come. There's very little being offered in how to actually achieve it so that we have it by winter, which is just around the corner for us here in Sweden and in other countries. So, so with that, I'm obviously somewhat negative. And to help me out with this is a good friend of mine, Andre Havas, who is the CEO of Simalgo. So Andre, if you just maybe want to introduce and then kind of give a little bit better light for what I've been saying. How do people make money in the market? Because they're in the market to make money. There are a lot of investors that are afraid and pulled a lot of money back and off the shelves. So with that, I'll let you talk instead of keep talking. Thank you.
Sure, Chris, and thank you very much for having me on the show. Just for the record, Simalgo is a financial technology company. We are developing software for professional investors in order to make informed decisions and allocate and optimize portfolios of assets. So we offer a very deep integrated data set in our web-based tool where you can apply filters and then subsequently also model and build portfolios. So with that said, I'm not giving advice. I'm not a market commentary. However, I do concur with you, Chris, with regards to the quite dismal outlook. It's sad to see, but that's how the world looks like today. But still, as you pointed out, markets are open and you need to be active with your portfolios regardless. So just to allude to some of the comments that you made with regards to the markets, I will share my screen with you and I will give you a couple of examples how you can actually play out some of these scenarios that you have alluded to. So I will go into our software, and this is the software. So you will have an equity screen and an ETF selection screen. You can apply filters. So in this case, you made you were referring to electric vehicles. So if you just want to make a very quick search for electric vehicles, you can do it. So you can do so in our free text search engine. So when I push electric vehicles, it gives me 90 results. So here you go. So here you just have 90 companies that you can then apply more filters on in order to build some sort of an exposure towards electric vehicles if that is something that you believe in for the future. And as you pointed out, Chris, obviously there is data that can sustain that there's a growth in it. So that's an easy way of gauging a first initial universe and exposure to electric vehicles. And obviously you can just apply qualitative filters, financial filters, and also ESG filters on that universe of electric vehicles, which gives you the opportunity to subsequently build something that is exposed to electric vehicles but can also match your criteria. I think the other thing you said, Chris, you were alluding to aspects of the economy that could be conducive to inflation. So for that purpose, we have, for that purpose, I would probably myself, if I were a user of a platform and I had those quite pessimistic views as you just projected, I would go to the ETF selection. I would just do another one of those free text searches. I would probably just search for inflation. And from those 3,000 ETFs that we have uploaded in the system, you see I got 26 results that are somewhat exposed to inflation-linked government bonds or have some sort of a hedge against increased inflation. So from that point of view, basically in a get-go, you can build a portfolio of electric vehicles with an inflation hedge. And that's as simple as it can get. And unfortunately, the world is probably more complex than this, but it allows you to play out some of these themes that still might be able to make money in a world that all things being equal, looks quite pessimistic from where we are today.
So there is hope.
Well, I believe so. At the end of the day, we will prevail, but it's sad to see how the world has developed, and it's sad to see that given the technological advancement that we have made, that people are still acting in the kind of way they do now. So, but then again, that's not for me to pass a judgment on. I'm just a software developer.
Yeah, I think, and I think what your tool is offering is very important, because in order to succeed, you need to be prepared, and by preparing, you'll be able to succeed. If I sound like one of our American politicians, so and succession is the way to go forward, right?
You know, it's all about the unknown unknowns, Chris.
Exactly. So, well, thank you very much, Andre, and thank you for bringing a little brevity to today. And we'll put up on the screen where people can find your product, Semalgo.com.
That's it.
Yep. Okay. And we'll let them talk to their advisors, because we're of course not giving out any information that's to be considered advice or portfolio construction. So with that, we'll thank you very much, Andre, and we're going to wish everybody happy hunting and good investing in the market. And Andre, if you want to say goodbye, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Bye-bye.